probably need this one too. Yeah. Let's see. I'm very honored to speak in front of you today, and life is pretty good, isn't it? What a wonderful location we have here. I actually sent a picture of the view from my hotel room to my wife, and quite bitterly she sent a picture back of the laundry room where she was today. So I think we should all be happy where we are right now. So can we make it perfect? So my name is Dan Sommer. As Vladimir said, I work for Gartner. It's an organization, a large organization, and we do a lot of research around the IT area, coming trends, markets, and I will focus largely this presentation on the entire business analytics space and where it is heading, let's say, over the coming 7 to 8 years. There's a lot of buzzwords out there. I'm not sure how familiar you are with them, like cloud, mobile, social, big data, these type of things. So I'll try to frame those buzzwords in terms of how actually the market is developing and when different triggers will happen in this space. And sometimes I will turn around because it's...
No, here is the... Yeah.
Let's see, here we go. Let me kick it off with an interesting, let's say, data charts, if you like. The only constant is change. Change has always been there. This quote is disputed who said it first, but it goes back all the way to Greek, old Greek times, and old Greek philosophers. And I think change has always been there, but the question is, hasn't change accelerated? To me, it certainly feels like change has accelerated. We're thinking about, the global crisis. Just think about what has happened in the last 10 years. The global financial crisis with ensuing regulation, environmental disasters, globalization where money is moving from west to east, and importantly, the digital revolution that we're in the middle of and we fully haven't really understood what that will lead to. I think the statistic here captures it pretty well in terms of where jobs have been created just in the last 10 years, and in the last 5 years. This is from LinkedIn Analytics, and it shows the percentage change in jobs created versus jobs lost just in 5 years. And you can see it's been a dramatic shift, and we're in the middle of this shift right now. And ability to adopt to change will be extremely important going forward. I would even venture to say that those organizations that don't adopt to change will probably not exist in 7 to 8 years, in this time frame we're talking about. And clearly analytics is kind of central for being able to spot outliers, to be able to look at patterns, to be able to do analytics. Several organizations out there, for example, IBM's research unit have found that organizations that are quote-unquote analytically agile, they have 50% better profitability. They have double the EBITDA margin, the market capitalization. And so there's a clear correlation between organizations that are heavily invested and doing well in terms of analytics, analytically agile organizations, and those organizations that are lagging behind. And that's why we think that analytics will be very central for change and for business model reinvention, and that's why the whole business analytics space is booming. It's actually growing at twice the rate of the entire enterprise software space. And we're expecting that to continue over the coming years, which this chart is trying to illustrate here. So it's a $65 billion space, growing at a compound annual growth rate of roughly 7%. And we expect that to land somewhere along the lines of 112 billion by 2020. Now, if it does that, then we'll be in some sort of state where we'll look at having analytics spread much broader, analytics everywhere, based on all data, not just structured data, and at the point of decision or action. So those are the kind of, let's say, nirvana state or utopian states where we're expecting this entire market to move to. And much of what I will talk about today is how the entire market and users are adopting this so that we will get to that end state by 2020. analytics everywhere based on all data at the point of decision. But that has not been the case. I mean, this is not a new thing, business intelligence. People have, and before that, decision support and management information system. People have been talking about this for decades. Yet, something happened that really, it's been driven very much from IT, where IT had to build these dimensions and hierarchies on top of information systems and databases. And it's been very much in a descriptive state, so you have basically reported on data that has already happened, what has happened. That's kind of where the market has been. And you had to build these heavy infrastructures which IT had to sign off. And frankly, we have failed to reach beyond, let's say, the 25% of users in organizations. And we measure this at Gartner, we measure it every year, and we've seen that, let's say until 2010, you see there's a timeline there. Until 2010, we didn't really reach beyond that stage. By the way, can I just ask, there's a lot of people here from central banks and from financial organizations and from government entities. How many of you are in the IT department today? If I could pose that question. One hand. So this is a kind of an unusual audience in terms of what I normally speak about. Two. So if we start with IT and then we'll move beyond IT basically. If we start with IT where much of this space has been historically, we can see that the IT budget has basically not moved in 10 years. If we normalize a normal IT budget back to 2003, we could see there was some good years there and some moderate growth, and then it fell off in 2009 with the financial crisis, and it started clawing its way back up. But over a 10-year period, we're pretty much at the same level as we were 10 years ago. And we ask this every year. We have the biggest CIO survey globally, 2,000 CIOs. We ask them, what do you plan? Do you plan any increases for IT budgets going forward? And we actually get that for 2013, they're expecting more or less IT budgets to be flat or even declining by 1%. So what does this tell us? It tells us that CIOs have to do more with less or declining amounts of information, which is very challenging. It also tells us that when times are tough, people go to the IT department and do significant cuts there. So that's a pretty challenging environment to work in. If we're looking at the wish list of the IT department and the CIO, Central Information Officer or Chief Information Officer, if we're looking at what their wish list is, what they want to build, we can see that analytics and business intelligence, this broad category where I would also put all of the stuff that we're doing here today, lands, is number one and continues to be number one. So that's good news, though. That means that even though spending is pretty challenging, like I showed you in the previous slide, analytics will continue to get new money, and existing projects will most likely continue to be funded. But it's also bad news. I mean, why is it bad news? Because analytics and BI is the number one priority year after year. So it's clearly not something that's just an easy fix and it goes away. This is not a project, this is a program, this is an ongoing thing, a very challenging thing, a difficult nut to crack, if you like. So that's where we've been until 2010. And mainly IT departments have chosen to buy these large IT systems from what we call mega vendors, large mega vendors. But we're actually seeing, so SAP, Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, etc. But we're actually seeing that buying is shifting, which this audience very much confirms, outside of the IT department largely. And when we measured this in 2012, we've broken through that ceiling of 25%. And we actually now have, when we're asking the question, percentage of potential users that analytics reaches in your organization, respondents say that 31% of users are using BI and analytics today. So we've broken through that ceiling. But the buying centers are also shifting, so new people are buying. And who's buying? It's the department. So large work groups out into business units or departmental buying. That's where more and more of the buying is opening up. And why all of a sudden is buying happening in the business units? There's a couple of things that traditional BI tools have failed to do. They failed to reach usability, they failed to reach speed, and they failed to reach relevance. Now, I think any disruptive technology, if it wants to really reach mainstream, has to crack these three: usability, speed, and relevance. A very famous example, which we often use for this, is the internet, right? The internet had been around for decades. The internet had been around for 40, 50 years. ARPANET, guys in lab coats working in academia and military, communicating with big machines with each other. So we could connect devices with each other. But when did the internet really start flying? When did it start taking off and become a technology that changed everything? It was when usability was cracked. The Netscape browser, it all of a sudden became easy to find things. Or speed, when things moved from really slow dial-up connections to broadband. Or relevance, when you got the search engine like AltaVista and WebCrawler and afterwards also Google taking over this space largely. That's when the internet became mainstream. And I think something similar to that is happening right now in the BI and analytics space. And it's enabled by a whole bunch of different technologies, which enables users not having to go to the IT department necessarily as a bottleneck anymore. And I list a few of them here. I will highlight three that really are moving this dial in the BI and analytics space right now in 2013. So again, just looking at the usability, speed, and relevance areas, we have really emerging a space called quote-unquote data discovery. And it's a new breed of technology tools, a new breed of analytic tools that address the area of usability, because traditionally you had to read like a technical manual to understand how to do anything in terms of getting information out or querying information. Now there's a whole bunch of tools that can do intuitive interfaces, visualization, or dynamic dashboards in a very intuitive fashion without training. Speed. This, as you see, there's like a chart there. I don't know how you can see that in the Lightroom. I think you can. It's basically a chart that shows the price of memory coming down drastically over time. And that enables people to put more storage in other places than disk. And these built-in performance layers that access data in memory or through direct connectors through data sources or through other technologies like columnar data stores, appliances, enable speed to be much better than it was previously. And then relevance. Traditionally, business analysts had to go to an ETL developer or data integrator to access the information, but more we're seeing that business analysts are empowered to do ETL and data integration at the time of analysis through mashups, data blending type of scenarios. So these type of three things are actually leading to this whole new space called data discovery, which traditionally have been led by those vendors there, Tableau Software, ClickTech, and TIBCO Spotfire. You may have heard of them. But if there was a single market theme, and I'm quoting from our Magic Quadrant, in 2012, it would be that data discovery became a mainstream architecture. And as you can see, pretty much all of the other vendors, the leading vendors in this space, are adopting this type of data discovery approach right now. And I know Prognos is as well. I'm sure they will share some of that with you or can demo it on the show floor with you. So that's clearly something that is moving the dial. By the way, this is our Magic Quadrant. This is our way to plot out how different vendors in the space are performing in terms of execution and in terms of vision. And there's things that you have to take into account. And Prognos is a very fast mover in this space. Just in a matter of 2 years, they surpassed a whole bunch of vendors and they're moving into the Challengers Quadrant. Yeah, so the first one that moves the dial in 2013 is basically data discovery. The other one is operational BI. As I mentioned to you, performance is less of an issue today than it used to be. Through in-memory, through columnar data stores, through appliances, which enables people to do, if not real-time analysis, near enough real-time analysis. Which means that the data is still interesting, the data is still relevant, and the data is still quote-unquote hot when you're looking at it. So it's not historical data that bears no relevance anymore. And there's a whole new breed of vendors that are focusing on real-time BI. So we're certainly seeing movement in the operational BI space as well. And then the third thing that moves the dial in 2013 in terms of market trends is that no longer do you necessarily only want to buy a platform, and this is addressing business users directly. Do you know this person? Anyone? Sorry?
Is it a Korean?
Korean?
Yeah.
I think he looks Korean.
The musician who wrote that Gangnam Style?
No. But his name is, I forget too, Thomas Herndon. He became world famous just a couple of weeks ago. Why did he become world famous? Because he basically critiqued this research note from Ken Rogoff and Carmen Reinhardt. Growth in a time of debt. Very, very famous research note, which is used by the Republican Party as their weapon that you need to do austerity packages. That's the only way to get out of the economic crisis, because their finding was that countries historically, when their public debt goes over 90%, then very bad things happen to growth. That was their key finding. The only problem is they did these analytics and these algorithms in Excel, okay? And they didn't want to share the data, but this guy got a hold of the data. 28-year-old grad student from Cornell University. And he basically found that there was a bunch of errors in the algorithms and a bunch of data quality errors, which completely disproved that whole thesis. It actually shows that, no, there is no correlation between high debt, or the correlation is much weaker at least. So this might be the most expensive data quality error or spreadsheet error you've ever seen, because it has influenced world policy in countries like Spain, UK, and many, many other places. And this guy basically debunked that myth. So what is the key takeaway here? Number one, we've moved to a world where predictive is much more important than it was previously. And in predictive, it's not longer enough just to analyze data quality, the data, but you also need to kind of have governance on the algorithms and the predictive procedures, the peer reviews, etc., etc. It also tells us a story that you need proper tools for this type of stuff. You can't do this in suboptimal tools because it's prone to error. So that's kind of that whole predictive and basically the nexus of forces, cloud, mobile, social, big data, information. That's going to make analytics reach a much broader audience than previously. It's going to reach to the 75% of potential users in organizations. It's going to reach new user groups, such as people on the shop floor, much more executive people that have analytics in their iPad that haven't used it before. Your customers, your stakeholders, your partner channel, it's going to reach broader than what it does today. So what's going to happen then beyond 2020? How are we going to reach that final stage to 100% of users and analytics everywhere? Well, now we're really bringing out the crystal ball here. We're really starting to make, let's say, visionary forecast or whatever you want to say, so it's obviously less accurate. But there's a couple of major themes that we already see here. Number one is the Internet of Things, Internet of Everything. Right? And what this chart is trying to show to you today is the amount of devices that are connected to the internet and how drastically that is growing. And you timeline it back to, for example, 1990, there was only a couple of 100,000 devices that were connected to the internet. Yeah? 2000, there was still less than 100 million devices. And then the explosion happened. Laptops, Smartphones now, more smartphones than laptops and PCs were connected to the internet. And now we have smart TVs, smart fridges, and it's just going to go beyond. It's going to be smart grass that tells you when to water your plants. It's going to be smart toasters that tell you when it needs servicing. I mean, I can go on and on. Smart cars. And this is a futuristic scenario, but it's already happening now. And it's going to create so much more information that can be analyzed. We're seeing insurance sector, for example, being all over this type of stuff with telematics, where they basically put a little device in your car. This is already happening in the US and in parts of Europe. They put a device in your car that tracks how you are driving. And then they will basically price premiums based on your behavior rather than clustering you as an 18-year-old driver, for example, and you get an extortionate insurance premium just because of the cluster that you belong to. So it opens up new business models and makes them much more granular again, to that point about fragmentation. This is maybe your future management team or your future decision support team. Scary, isn't it? It's a little bit like Terminator or Robocop or something like that. But we're rapidly moving in that direction, I'm telling you. Both from a consumer perspective, those of you who have tried Siri in your iPhone or Google One, this whole notion about natural language processing, semantic technologies, machine-to-human interaction. I mean, I'm amazed when I'm plugging something Swedish, a Swedish text, into Google Translate, and it translates over to English. It's almost perfect. It's quite scary. Now, with languages that are further apart from each other, it's not as perfect, but we're quickly moving in that direction, right? So that is certainly something that is happening right now. And it's happening from a consumer perspective, but it's also happening from an enterprise perspective. How many of you in the audience have heard about IBM Watson? One hand in the back. Two. IBM Watson is this big machine that IBM built, bringing together large data amounts, huge processing power, their best machines, and natural language algorithms. And they tried it against the two best contestants of this game show in the US called Jeopardy, which is basically asking questions. It's like a quiz show. And this machine beat the two best contestants of Jeopardy of all time. So we're kind of already in a situation now where machines can do a lot of the analysis, even more unstructured analysis than previously. And they're now rolling this out into areas like insurance, healthcare, to really look at large data amounts, for example, unstructured data amounts. So this is happening right now, and it will happen more going forward. Crowdsourcing. You know, we talked about the predictive space and how difficult it is to get those skills, how hard it is to acquire statistical skills, to acquire physicists, mathematicians, data scientists. And those that are out there are hired by large organizations such as the ones you're working for, or Fortune 500 companies. But going forward, we need to change that. We need to make predictive analytics easier than what it is today. And crowdsourcing is one option that is being offered up right now. There's a company called Kaggle, for example, Kaggle.com, where companies, and probably also some banks, even though some of that information may be sensitive, are throwing the information over the wall, anonymizing it, normalizing it, and basically putting a bounty on it, like the team or individual that can solve our algorithms or our data models in the most accurate way, testing it against something, will win $500,000 or $1 million. So there's these huge awards out there that can be won, Kaggle.com. And it's proved hugely successful. There are companies like, for example, Allstate, which has a world-class statistical actuarial team in-house, yet they improved their model by a factor of 10x when they did this crowdsourcing thing, because you have teams, you have hundreds of teams competing with each other, and I think that will democratize a lot of this kind of predictive and prescriptive space. And one way to do that is to open data up. We're certainly seeing that as well. It's a major trend. The US government is putting more and more data out, data.gov, for example, where they're throwing all kinds of irrelevant data, seemingly irrelevant data out there, and people can build applications on top of that. And it's happening also in cities like Chicago and New York. And Kenya, for example, I don't believe the Statistical Bureau of Kenya is here, but they are one of the early ones out the gates. They have an open place where you can throw data out there. Any kind of data, which increases transparency and enables people to build analytics on top of that. So crowdsourcing is certainly something that is happening pretty rapidly. And I know Prognos is working with many of your organizations to also enable analytics to reach a much broader audience than it had previously. As is the other technologies that I spoke about, is that you can more and more pick your own analytic flavor in the context of what you want to look at. So we can see that whereas some of these mega vendors like Oracle, for example, traditionally really targeted the IT department because that's where the money was. Increasingly, they want to build packaged analytic applications for the business user directly. So we see the traditional BI vendors coming at it to provide more packaged analytic functionality, like SAS, Oracle, and FICO, for example. We also see systems integrators or services providers trying to provide more packaged intellectual property so that they can engage more with the business user directly over shorter engagements in a challenged economy. Vendors like IBM, you see I put IBM up there, for example, Deloitte, Accenture, Cognizant. Why do I put IBM in the services category and not the software category? Because they want to have a services engagement on the back end. That's the entire goal of their acquisitions of different packaged analytic applications. And then we have independents like Prognos. Really, to me, from the outside, that's a real strength of Prognos that they basically can target. They have all of these different customization enablement capabilities that they can do either through frameworks or through like a services delivery on the back end. So in each vertical and horizontal sector you're looking at, there's going to be a specialist. And in areas like development, bank analytics, credit risk, world economy monitoring, etc., Prognos is one of the leading vendors. And then, so the point is, the playing field is opening up. It's not just a software play anymore. It's a software, services, and content play. So not only do you have the software vendors, but you also have the services vendors, and you also have the information vendors coming into the space. So vendors like Global Insight, Economist, Intelligence Unit, they also want to bring more analytics to the end user than they could previously, together with KPIs that you can measure your organization with compared to other organizations. So that certainly is one area that is moving right now. Okay, so then we've made that journey from the 25% to 50%. We do think that by 2014, 50% of potential users will have BI and analytics. So we're seeing very rapid adoption right now. We're in that second phase. And we've also then moved from what we initially spoke about, descriptive, what has happened, to what we call diagnostic. Why has things happened? Because the data is still interesting to look at, because you have all of these new tools that sit closer to the analyst. You can do much more analysis than previously, which is moving the entire BI and analytics space into more looking at why things have happened, not just report on historical information. So that's an interesting shift. And this is happening through those technologies. So we're at 2014 right now. So what's the next frontier? We moved from IT to business units and large work groups. Well, the next frontier is basically the consumer, or the individual, or the personal use case. As you can see that lady over there representing. we're already seeing a big trend right now in the IT space. Bring your own device. You may have heard of it. It's basically you're bringing in your own telephone, you're bringing in your own PC gear, etc., etc. Consumerization of IT. And slowly we'll see something similar happening also in the analytics space. And it's very much driven by these four forces, which we think will basically change the way we do business, the way technology is adopted over the coming 4 to 5 years. But it's only becoming mainstream in 2014 and beyond. That's the point here. And those four areas are mobile, cloud, information, and social. And even though everyone is talking about these four areas, some areas we're not seeing really rapid adoption of. For example, everyone's talking about mobile BI, but only 11% are actively using today. Same thing with cloud. Only 3% of revenues in the BI analytics space come from vendors that provide analytics through the cloud. Same thing for social. Everyone talks about that, but actually 70% of enterprise-led social projects fail today. So they're not really mature enough, there are not enough sponsors in organizations. Same thing with information or big data. How many of you have heard of the term big data in the audience? A few hands go up, about 1/3. This is a major buzzword right now, which basically tries to capture this whole trend that information is pretty much doubling every 18 months. Information that we have is doubling every 18 months. So I think it was the CEO of Google that said that we've created more information after 2005, I believe, than from beginning of history, beginning of human time to 2005. So we're on a very, very rapid adoption path of information right now. And it's happening through the 3 V's. Volume, data amounts growing. Variety, more information amounts that can be analyzed. Previously people just looked at rows and columns. Now you can look at much more variable data. And velocity, it's coming at you at a much faster rate. Can you do real time? Can you do streaming? That type of stuff. Machine data. So it's a very big trend in the industry. But everyone's talking about it, but no one is really buying the technology yet. So we see this largely as being a services play right now. 16 times bigger services versus software. But the point here is that all of these areas are already happening. In that third layer there that I'm talking about now, the consumer area, it's already happening. So if we're looking at mobile, most of us here in the audience have a smartphone, right? With analytic capabilities inside the smartphone. It could be weather application, or it could be Runkeeper that plots how you are running, for example, in the forest. And that's going to trigger off a lot of light bulbs in brains of executives, for example, who will then go into their organizations and try to sell doing more mobile, for example. Same thing with cloud, where information is already sitting out in the cloud, like sentiment analysis or web analytics. Then the analysis is largely done in the cloud as well, etc., etc. So it's already happening, but it's happening in an inverse fashion. So it's from that third layer and moving into organizations. Business units will most likely be laggards in adopting because they're already doing those other technologies that I'm talked about in the previous slides. And IT, they've optimized their systems for the best part of a decade or longer. They've built these beautiful architectures and they're not going to throw those out unless they absolutely have to. So they will be the last ones adopting, maybe only in 2020 and beyond. So it's not just about analytics being brought in by consumers, but it's also about analytics being able to look much better at the consumer and be much more fragmented in terms of the analysis. So the question is, who knows you best? Who knows you best? Is it your parents that you grew up with? Or is it your best friend that you maybe were in university with and you shared all those secrets with? Or can it be that bad that it's actually Google that knows you best? Right? They know everything you're searching for, everything you're looking for. Or can it be Facebook that knows you best? This is my social graph here. And in a picture, it tells 1,000 words. It tells who I'm friends with. It tells it timelines out exactly where I've been living my entire life. I had Hungarian parents. You should say family Hungary there, because most of them are Hungarian. I grew up in Stockholm. I had my childhood and high school years there. I then studied in different places, for example, France, in Clermont-Ferrand, but also in the US. I then moved after university to London. I worked there for a company called Context. I lived in this neighborhood called Streatham. And then I started working for Gartner at a later stage. First, Gartner International, the UK headquarters. And then I moved back to Stockholm, Gartner Nordics. And then I bought a house just a few hundred meters away from where I grew up. So I'm back on square zero, basically. And the loop has closed. But why am I telling you this kind of trivial story of my life? It's because the chief marketing officer is back in the driver's seat. The marketing guy is the cool guy again, and the strategic guy for organizations, because he's going to find that next $1 billion of revenue in organizations. And some people even think that the CMO will spend more on IT than the CIO, which really tells that story that buying is moving outside of IT. And every budget is an IT budget. And in this world, we've moved from descriptive data, what has happened, to diagnostic data, why has it happened? And a natural progression of that is that predictive will become mainstream. What will happen next, right? And this is where many of you have your expertise. Now, get good news for you. It's an extremely hot area that will grow going forward. Statistical skills, mathematical skills, what we have branded as data scientist is going to be one of the hottest jobs going forward in organizations. Only 12% of organizations do this type of stuff today. So there's a lot of runway here for growth and opportunity. And we're seeing this really moving from a little siloed area to basically becoming much more strategic to organizations. We're seeing the emergence of the chief CDO. Anyone knows what that means? It could be chief digital officer or chief data officer. This is or chief analytic officer. This is a really emerging area in organizations, which basically highlights that this whole thing about analytics, predictive, pattern matching, etc., is moving, and it's becoming a strategic thing at board level in organizations. So very much this is a reaction of all those other things I talked about. There's so much information out there to analyze. There's so much insights and findings to be gleaned from what is out there. And that means that there's a whole bunch of new vendors that can do this stuff. It used to be SAS Institute that really had the dominance here, and they were the dominant player. But we're seeing that changing. I mean, Prognos is clearly an example here that is really coming into this space. Other vendors like SPSS that was bought by IBM. Also new ways of doing it. It could be business process outsourcing. It could be services. IBM is betting big on that. So there's different approaches which is trying to make it easier, because this stuff is hard. This stuff is really, really hard. It's not something, and it's hard to recruit people that can do this as well. So that's really, if I start summarizing what I've been talking about now, a great deal of money is chasing this space, right? There's a lot of money in this space. We also speak to venture capitalists and risk capital firms, and they tell me that one anecdote was, if you have in your business description analytics anywhere in your business description, then the valuation of your business plan is doubled. If you have big data anywhere in your big business description, the evaluation of your company is tenfold. So it's just one anecdote, but it's just an interesting thing to say that there's a lot of money chasing this space right now. And a point here is that, yes, there is mergers and acquisitions happening. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening in the BI analytics space. from vendors like IBM, HP, SAP, and they're trying to acquire all of that, the different capabilities. However, they can't acquire at the pace of innovation. There is more innovation coming than that they can acquire. So, despite ongoing consolidation and acquisitions from a market perspective, from what we call mega vendors, new categories of analytic applications will continue to emerge, resulting in more, not less, market fragmentation. So the point is, just having one ring to rule them all or one large vendor to do all of analytics is probably a pipe dream. There are vendors that are much more specialized in different verticals and niches that can do a better job. And that clearly is something that we are seeing. So that really wraps it up, what I've talked about. We've made this journey now. Remember I spoke about analytics everywhere, on all data at the point of decision, right? That was how the market will evolve until 2020. It's happening through devices. Internet of Things, more connected devices with each other, speaking to each other. Language, natural language processing, algorithms, which brings this whole area to kind of optimization scenarios, taking the human equation out of the equation. Makes the whole area prescriptive. That's the last mile. But we're also seeing before that, the whole area of predictive evolving, and it's going to be much more enabled, and there's going to be much more information that you can build predictive on from areas like cloud, social, mobile, and information. And we're in this phase right now where business units are adopting analytics much more broadly, and to me, what you as an audience is confirming that. Buying of analytics is happening outside of the IT department through things like data discovery, these new ways of visualizing information, of mashing up information, technologies like in-memory, but also packaged applications or putting analytics into the context of how people want to look at it. So if you're a pricing guy, you want to look at it. If you're a risk guy, you want a risk analytic application. That is all happening right now. Prognos is one of the major vendors that's doing that. And operational BI as well. So the data is now interesting to look at. From an operational perspective, which enables analytics to a whole different extent. And let's not forget about IT. They will continue to be important, and when something can be mass-produced, it can trickle down to the IT that can do that scalable type of approach. And you still need reporting. Many people will continue to need reporting, and many people will continue to need analytics on systems of record. Very important information that you go to prison if you screw up. So sometimes IT, will continue to play an important role. But the point is, for this to evolve, it has to move far outside of the IT department with new buying centers, new approaches, new technologies. And the whole space is moving from descriptive, what has happened, to diagnostic, why has it happened, to predictive, what will happen going forward, to prescriptive and optimization, what do we do about it? Closing the loop with decisions. And when that happens, then the whole way we're thinking about application architectures will change. Because let's face it, business applications is where much of the money has been. And it's been trickling information out to analytics, or BI, which has been a dirty cousin, an afterthought that you did from information that came into applications. But if we're moving to this worldview that we're talking about, it could very well look something like this in the future, where you do the analysis first on information, and that analysis feeds stuff out to applications going forward. So we're in much more of a kind of a prescriptive, predictive type of worldview. And when that happens, and those organizations and those countries and those central banks that have made this journey will look very, very strong for the future in a world where analytics will dominate much more. Thank you very much. That was my presentation.